Joining me here now to preview the All-Ireland final between Mayo and Tyrone this Saturday is a woman who needs no introduction to anyone, Mayo and Carnacon legend Cora Staunton. So Cora, first of all, I suppose you've achieved many things as a player and gone many places, but what's life like as an RT pundit these days?
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit different, Oisín, being obviously behind the camera rather than being on the pitch. I suppose as a player and one that's probably still playing a little bit of football with Carnacon and obviously playing in Australia, you'd always prefer to be on the pitch. But no, it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed my work with RT in the last kind of 18 months. Obviously this year has been very busy working with them. But yeah, no, it's brilliant. You get to see the game from a really different angle. You're not a supporter, so sometimes the Mayo games are probably a little bit harder to do because you're really invested in the game and wanting the lads to do well. But yeah, no, it's been brilliant. I suppose the side of it a lot of people don't see is that you just can't turn up on match day and just talk. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in the lead up to any match. Whether it's a Connacht final or an All Ireland semi final, and even more so for an All Ireland final. So yeah, there's a lot of watching of old games over the last couple of months and reading a lot of papers and listening to a lot of podcasts. But, it's a thing I have a huge interest in. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed my time and working with them and hope to continue to it for another while.
Yeah, and obviously you've played in plenty of big games in your time, but do you find going on television nerve-wracking at all?
No, I think once you're prepared, it's like anything. It's a bit like on the Gaelic football pitch. If you feel that you're fully prepared and you've done all your training, you're normally fine. And that's the way I suppose I am when I go on TV as well. If I've all my preparation done during the week and, I feel I know enough about, the two opponents, whoever it's playing, whether it's Mayo and Tyrone in this case, or, if it's Dublin and Kildare, once you have your research done, after that, it's all opinion based and how you see a match. And yeah, no, it's been great, and obviously you're working with some really good pundits, and you learn a lot from them. I've learned a lot from obviously the likes of Tomás O'Shea, who I think is a super pundit, Oisín McConville, people like that. So yeah, you take little bits of nuggets from all of them and try and learn it. So yeah, you get a little bit nervous, obviously, just before the cameras go on, but yeah, it's normally you just feel like you're commentating a game like you'd be at home.
Great stuff. So Mayo, right, before we go back to early on in the season and to comments that were made by a certain Kerry pundit, to beat Dublin the last day, like how big of a monkey off the back was that of this Mayo team?
Yeah, I think you can see by the raw emotion, when the final whistle went, 4 weeks ago, nearly now at this stage. I think that showed how much of a monkey off the back it was for that Mayo team. And it wasn't just for probably, the Mayo team that, the 20 that took the pitch. It was the other, maybe 21 that are on the panel and the management team. And you could see from the pictures on the TV as well of players in the stands, the likes of Diane Moran, who for the majority of the game was, trying to be, the ex-Mayo player. But, when Robert Tinley kicked that point, he went into supporter mode. So for the likes of the Keith Higgins, the Seamus O'Shea's, the Chris Bards, the people that you could see in the crowd watching the game, it was a monkey off the back for the whole lot of them. It was a monkey off the back for the Mayo supporters. And, you have to look at it, you have to give credit to this Dublin team. They were going for, 7 in a row and had beaten Mayo as nemesis. Really right since 2013 really was when it all started. They've had massive battles in that time, and to beat a team who was talked about as probably the best Gaelic football team of all times, to beat them in an All Ireland semi final, especially after their first half performance and without their talisman in Cillian O'Connor. So to be, I think they were 7 points down or 6 points down at half time, to come back from that against a Dublin team of that calibre, and to be probably missing one of their key talisman in Cillian O'Connor and young footballer there, Oisín Mullal, it makes it even more incredible. So yeah, it was obviously anyone that was there on the day that was lucky enough to be one of the 24,000, the experience and the joy and the atmosphere, I remember that day going to myself, there's definitely more than 24,000 in this stadium. It just, the emotion that was poured out and the noise for the 15 or 20 minutes after the match was nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, and obviously we'll come to Tyrone in a second, but just to talk about Killian, you were standing right beside him when he said it a couple of months ago, but Pat Spillane famously declared that Mayo wouldn't even win Connacht, and the main reason he gave was Killian O'Connor. And at the time, I suppose a lot of people would have said, with the way Galway were being talked about, that he might have a point, that we are very dependent on Killian for scores. In your opinion, how well have Mayo adapted to life without not only our biggest scorer of all time, but the highest scorer in the history of the men's senior football championship?
Yeah, I think they've coped obviously remarkably well. I think probably the biggest challenge is yet ahead in a couple of days' time, and I don't think Killian's loss has been fully felt, and I hope it won't be fully felt. Obviously, against Galway early stages, you might have thought there was probably one or two frees that Ryan O'Donoghue didn't probably go after, and that normally Killian are put down on the carpet and put over. But obviously against Dublin, possibly the same thing. We didn't really. We've had Robert Hilney that stepped up in that regard, and against Dublin kind of kicked 3 frees. But Killian's ability isn't just free taking, it's not just scoring, there's so much more. The biggest thing I remember talking about and brought it up in one of the games that Mayo played is Killian's tackling ability. I don't think if anyone watches, and when I'm forensically watching matches, you look at the work rate from Killian O'Connor as a marquee forward, you probably don't always see that work rate from a forward, and coming back in their defence. It's probably one of Mayo's best tacklers, and that's credit to him. So yeah, like his loss is monumental, but at the same time, what this Mayo team and players, I suppose, like Ryan O'Donoghue especially, has taken up the mantle, and by all accounts, Killian is still having a huge influence in the background, with Ryan, but also with the whole team. Tommy Conroy, players like this has flourished, and maybe it's made them step up and become leaders before they probably thought they'd be leaders. But that I get that mentality from Ryan O'Donoghue. He's the type of player that is just willing to. He to me, he's a Killian O'Connor type of player. The way he plays, the way he tackles, the way he works. Killian is probably a little bit more flair than him, but I think the likes of them have really stepped up. But they've had to step up. So yeah, he's a huge loss. As I said, my biggest worry is that we fully seen the effects of his loss come All-Ireland final day, when the pressure even mounts more. Yeah, the Dublin match is obviously a huge pressure, but All-Ireland final day is even a different kettle of fish. Obviously we'll have 41,000 at the game, and for these players, the likes of Ryan, the likes of Tommy in particular, because they're 2 forwards, but even the likes of Oisin Mullen and Owen McLaughlin, their first All-Ireland final was last year, and as we can all know, last year's final was so much more different than any other final, with it being at Christmas time, being COVID, no crowd. So when the pressure is really on and you're in that cauldron, and 5 minutes to go and Mayo have a free from 40 yards, I just hope Killian won't be missed, and that pressure, because that's Killian's biggest asset. It didn't matter the day and it didn't matter the time. He always stood up to the pressure. So yeah, I just hope he's not missed in them really pressured moments, and that the likes of the Ryans and the Tommies and players like that can step up.
Yeah, and obviously throughout your career you were thankfully rarely injured for such a prolonged period as Killian is, but what sort of influence do you think he's having outside of the training ground? Like we hear reports that he's back doing a bit of running this week, but when you're kind of outside, removed from the whole camp, is it possible to have any kind of an influence at all, or how is he being used, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think in Killian's case, he will certainly be having an influence. Maybe not all players when they're in long-term injured, mightn't get to have the same influence as Killian has. But James Horan's a very smart man, and will know that Killian has been, captain of the team, and under James's time, he's a huge leader. He has been since, he's been an 18, 19-year-old since he first came into the Mayo senior team, and even before that. There's not too many players the likes of Killian that has had that career where they've come in from a young age. Aidan O'Shea is possibly the other one. So yeah, his leadership and his work with the younger players would certainly be huge advantage. Even, and I watched him even against Leitrim when he was in the stands and a couple of other games, you see him sit down. He's eyes for James Horan as well. I'm sure, while he's not picking teams or anything like that, he's given opinions to James Horan, and I'm sure he's been sitting in the stand for A versus B games and watching them, and certainly doing a level of coaching with the players and inform them. You can see when he plays with Ballintubber, and there's not many eyes on him, and many people may be watching games. He does that with the younger lads in Ballintubber as well, and even some of the older lads. I think when you're a natural leader and he'll eventually be a coach, that's already in you. I think he's having a huge influence on the team. It's probably just not being seen by the general public, and the way he conducts himself, I'm sure, in rehab, to be back running at this stage, and the amount of work and effort he puts in, when guys are training. The younger lads see that too, and they see that his will to try and get back and try and make Mayo football better, and has been doing that right throughout his career. That gives the younger lads a drive on too, and the older lads in the team.
Yeah. Now, to talk about Tyrone for a second, you've obviously watched them all year studiously. You've covered them. Like ourselves, when I think about, wrote off by a lot of people, had a COVID outbreak, weren't fancy to beat Kerry at all. Didn't exactly blow them away, but a very impressive defeat nonetheless. A lot of people saying maybe they don't have a player like Sean Kavanagh or Peter Canavan or Stephen O'Neill like they did one time, but nonetheless regarded as a very, very tough and solid unit. What have you made of them, and what do you think we can expect from them on Saturday?
Yeah, I've been obviously very impressed by them. Anyone that comes out of Ulster football, we know the Ulster Championship is a lot different to any of the other 3 provincial championships, and their road out of Ulster has been pretty difficult. Having to both beat Donegal and Monaghan, and who are 2 top class teams in themselves, and who would have had All Ireland aspirations. So from that alone to get out of Ulster, and then obviously to come up against the favourites for the All Ireland at the time in Kerry, and after, I suppose you have to look back to their league semi-final defeat to Kerry, and the conceding of 6 goals. I think everyone wrote them off straight away from that performance. And you have to look that they're under a new management team. It takes a lot of time to settle, and with COVID, obviously, the training season has been very condensed this year. So the likes of Brian and Fergal wouldn't have had much time before the league. To set them. So it obviously takes time for a new management to come in and put their imprint there, and to come up with their style of play and their philosophy and the way they want to play. So I think a lot of people read into their defeat to Kerry in the league, but ever since then, they're the Tyrone of old. Mickey Hart is not their manager, but they're still playing a similar style to the Mickey Hart era, but it's a little bit more expansive. They're not playing as defensive, as in they're not playing the double or treble sweeper. They're still playing with a sweeper, but they're having a higher press up along the middle. So I think they're a very balanced team. They probably don't have any really star forwards. Darren McCurry possibly being their star. I think he's kicked 26 points in the championship to date, but besides that, they have a lot of players that are very similar. And the term that it's used now, these are the kind of transition players, the ones that can run all day and transition the ball from the back line into the forward line, and at the same time kick scores. I suppose we've seen it was very unique in the Kerry game. The whole full back line had scored a point each before half time the last day. So they're that type of team that don't really rely on any individual like Kerry rely on maybe David Clifford or Sean O'Shea. They're very well balanced, and they just have some very unique footballers in the likes of Conor Myler, Kieran McGeary, Conor McKenna obviously come back from AFL. They're quite elusive, and you're unsure at times what they may do. So I think they're very balanced, and credit again has to go to their management team for where they got. And their performance against Tyrone was exceptional at times, but at the same time there'll be a lot of Kerry looking at that game going, if only we got 1 or 2 things right, we could have bet Tyrone. So it's very fine margins, as I predict that it'll be on Saturday.
Just to bring it back to Mayo then, just looking at them at the minute, we have Owen McLaughlin and Oisin Mullen back in contention. Obviously Killian very unlikely to play any part. The perpetual debate about where do we play Aidan O'Shea. But in your opinion, what are the main things we have to get right if we're going to win on Saturday?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a couple of key battles, throughout the field. Matchups, even now, to try and match up players, it's very difficult. You don't know who's really going to match up on who. But I think the things that we're going to get right, I think the goalkeeper battle between Robert Hill and Liam Morgan, that's going to be a key matchup. Do Mayo push up on Morgan's kickouts? I think they certainly will, and they're going to put them under pressure like Kerry did. Do Tyrone push up on Henley's kickouts? I think they will. So I think the midfield battle is crucial, and I think it's the one area, if you look at the rest of the players, 15 players on the field, I think we're evenly matched right throughout. But I think it's where we have a little bit of an advantage is in our midfield, and that Tyrone midfield are quite relatively inexperienced, and haven't been the standout this year. Where if you look at our midfield, so obviously Kilpatrick and Kennedy, Kennedy being taken off early in the second half against Kerry. They haven't been the dominant force, so they don't have a very dominant midfield. But if you look at Mayo, with Matthew Ruan and Conor Loftus, and obviously Dermot O'Connor falls into that. So we have that'll be our key around the middle is them three guys. But if you look at the likes of Dermot and Conor Loftus, they're not known as natural midfielders. They're natural wing forwards and have an eye for getting on the ball and getting scores, where Matthew Ruan is obviously a natural midfielder and likes to drive forward. And I think that's the key. I think the likes of Conor Loftus and Dermot O'Connor will be two keys to getting scores that Mayo will need. This isn't going to be a high-scoring game, but I think the likes of Dermot, if he can kick, 1 or 2 points, Conor Loftus can do the same. I think that'll be a huge basis for Mayo going forward, because, I see this game being, something like a 13 points to 12 game. So scores are like that are going to be crucial. So I think that's one area, as you spoke about the debate, where Aidan is best at and where they should play him. In my opinion, and this is only my opinion, he certainly has to be between 14 and 11. We don't need to see him out around the middle. I think that's where he's best at times, sitting in at 14, and if we can get some ball into him, but also times coming out to 11 to disturb Niall Morgan's kickouts, because Aidan is such a powerful force around the middle. So there's so many intriguing battles, but I do think the one place we've an edge, and if you go through right from 1 to 15, I think the goalkeepers are very evenly matched. Our defences are very evenly matched, as is in our forwards. We don't have that massive marquee forward with Killian gone. So I do think that's an area that Matthew Ruan, Conor Loftus, and possibly Dermot, who's been playing out around there, could get us primary possession and get us on top.
My final question, Cora Staunton, has two parts for it. I want an answer from what your head is telling you and what your heart is telling you. It's a very simple question. Will we be waking up on Sunday morning as All-Ireland senior football champions?
Yeah, normally, your heart and your head tell different. But honestly, this time my heart and my head tell me that Mayo will win it. It's not going to be a pretty game. It's going to come down to the finest of margins. But I do think Mayo will get over by the narrowest of margins, a point or two. And as I said, I think it'll be a very low scoring game, something like 13 points to 11, 13 points to 12. But I do think this is finally Mayo's year, which again, after our talk, is remarkable to think that, we'd have thought Mayo would win All-Ireland and Killian O'Connor wouldn't feature. So I really do think that this is Mayo's year, but it's going to be it's going to be a hard stopper, and one that Mayo supporters will have to live a whole 75, 76 minutes on the edge.
Well, very good. Thanks very much, Cora. Listen, thanks again for your time, and what can we do at this stage except wish all of the Mayo players, and particularly our Ballintubber contingent, all the best, and see how we get on Saturday. Thanks very much, Cora.
No bother at all, Oisin. You're very welcome.